Welcome back to another episode of Story Behind the Story. Once again, I am joined this week by Corie. Corie, thank you so much for joining us once again. This week, you wrote a story over what some would find very interesting, some would find very gross, the art, or kind of experiment, rather, of pimple popping.
Yeah.
So walk me through a little bit about that. What was your motivation behind it? And then just give me a quick overview of the story.
So I am what's called a popaholic, so I'm someone who enjoys watching pimple popping videos. And Dr. Sandra Lee, she is also known as Dr. Pimple Popper. She recently, became famous on YouTube for these videos she would do of extracting blackheads, whiteheads, cysts, all that. And she just got a show on TLC.
I thought she got a TV show.
She did. And so I actually stumbled across that, and I was like, no, that would be a lot of fun. So I decided, why not write a story?
Okay. And then throughout following her, and you said you did a lot of other research as well going into this, what are some of the other interesting things and maybe other studies that you found about kind of pimple popping and related subjects?
So the study I found, they broke it down into 5 or 6 categories. So they talked about heat, so why people like spicy food, bitter, so unsweetened coffee. And it all goes back to this thing called benign masochism, where it's just we like experiencing weird and uncomfortable things from a safe distance. We don't have to suffer the consequences when we watch the videos of a pimple popping. And so that was just really interesting. And it also goes back to why people like sad music, roller coasters, all these things that we find enjoyment out in everyday lives. It's just some of us like pimple popping.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm not too big of a fan myself.
That's fair. A lot of people don't like them.
And then you said a lot of people don't like them. What are some of the reactions that you've gotten to the story? And you mentioned it a little bit before we went on about the staff, actually, and the photographers, how much fun they had putting this together.
Oh, the photographers were not happy with me. They thought it was the grossest thing ever. Our managing editor, Joe Andrews, he was it took me a couple times to get past the lead where I described pimples. And so he was just this is so gross. Some of the people I've interviewed, they were pimple popping is disgusting. I don't understand how anyone can like that. And then I talked to a dermatologist, and they're as long as these videos are being done in a safe environment and by a professional, for a professional standpoint, we don't mind them. And obviously they like doing it because that's their profession.
Yeah.
And there's actually a dermatology office in Maryville who are trying to get started making their own videos.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that.
Okay, and then I'll throw you one last little fun hit question.
Okay.
If you had to pick one of these weird kind of interesting things besides pimple popping, what would yours be?
Botfly larvae removal. Botflies, they bury into people's skin, and you have to pull them out with tweezers. And mango worms are the same way. I love it. I think it's so relaxing in a weird way.
Okay. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Story Behind the Story. Corie, thank you so much for joining us once again. I guess you could say her story was poppin'. Once again, that's going to wrap things up for this episode of Story Behind the Story. Thank you so much for joining us on the KNWT Channel 8 YouTube exclusive.